Okay, so this one is going to be a good one. It's the nature of DNA, and in truth, what I'm going to talk about is the nature of every aspect of reality. But DNA is a great example to demonstrate this, and this is it's the paradox of everything being in a state of flux or change constantly, and everything also being immutable, meaning unchangeable. Now, if something is immutable, then you can't change it. It's impossible to change it. There's no way to change it. And all of us know that. Well, it's pretty obvious that if I'm holding an acorn in my hand and I plant it, it's never going to become a rose bush. And it's because of its immutable nature. There are aspects of it that are immutable, and that are its DNA, its blueprint. And in the same way, if a draftsman creates a blueprint for building a house, then the builders, if they want to build that house, they have to build it based on that blueprint. It's immutable. You can't take that blueprint for the house and then build a hotel. So immutability is it is an aspect of nature, and what I would call these things, it's like the laws. The laws of nature are immutable. And, over time, human beings, as we've developed laws, beginning with common law specifically, which is constitution-based, we the people. So it recognizes the sovereignty of the human being, of life itself. And the word that we use to interpret the immutable nature of law, of these laws, which really are the laws of nature, the laws of the universe, the laws of reality that govern us, that are immutable, as we've said that they are unalienable, which is virtually the same thing. However, what we've done over time, and so here we have a legal framework that is based on the real world of life, of nature. If it rains, then the fact that it's raining is immutable for me. But what is mutable or changeable is whether or not I want to get wet or not. So do I get an umbrella out, or do I stand in the rain? That's the part of nature that I can control, that I have power over, that is mutable for me. And so what I want to break this down to is, the aspect of nature that is immutable is the DNA. It is the blueprint of what, of the template of the form of life that emerges because of that immutable template. It's always the DNA. Every building that you see, every hotel, every car, everything that was that has been created in a mutable way, was able to become what it is because of the immutable nature of its base, of its foundation. And the base foundation of every aspect of life is its DNA. An acorn cannot become a rosebush. It's immutable. So let's say, and if you wanted to create a blueprint for a rosebush, you wouldn't alter the DNA of an acorn. You would start from a clean slate. However, there are aspects of nature. So here's the paradox. Well, we'll say that it is a paradox. And that is the nature of a scion. So a scion is when we take the rootstock of something that has come before and we splice something new on top of it from some other form of life. And it forms a scion. And so what we do is we fuse the two chains of DNA together. And once they are fused, they become something new, entirely new. They take what's relevant from what came before and spliced on something entirely new, so that the union of both, the fusion of both, can become an entirely new form of life. So, in essence, what we've done is we've combined two immutable blueprints for a form of life. We fuse them together, and together they collaborate and become something entirely new. Now, it's inevitable in this scenario that there's going to be incompatibility. So the nature of one of those blueprints for the DNA may want to evolve in a specific way, and the nature of the blueprint for the other form of life wants to evolve in a different way. And so you reach a state of disharmony or discord. And so if you are the form of life that contains those spliced together aspects of DNA, if you are the life form that contains that DNA, then you've got aspects within you that are at odds with each other. You've got disharmony within you. And so you can quite literally be instinctively wanting to do two different things, wanting to behave in two different ways that are entirely opposed to each other. You see? This is very common. But this is the genius of life itself. Is that it is, and I would say the intelligence of life itself, is that no one's left behind. The genius of nature is that it's always evolving to meet the unmet need of some other form of life. And so if there is a form of life that has DNA that's been spliced together, and they are at odds with each other, and they are opposing each other, their natures opposing each other, then the intelligence of nature is seeking to adapt and evolve in ways that accommodate both. It's never a zero-sum game. It's never win-lose. And, unless the nature of the environment that they're contained within, unless the ability for the nature of one aspect of that DNA to evolve and adapt is limited, and the fact that it's limited is inhibiting the being that contains both of those spliced aspects from thriving or making progress. And that's the only time when an aspect of nature is sacrificed. Like a lizard losing its tail, for example. But if as long as the environment is conducive to that lizard having its tail, then it will have its tail. This is the genius of nature, that it is so efficient that nothing is ever wasted. Not a single thing is ever wasted. That lizard's tail will decay into it's found that its base elements, and those base elements will go back into the earth and be refused into some other form of matter within the plasma, it is plasma, within the plasma, within the earth. That's the genius of nature, and this is the genius that we need to bring into how we live as human beings, where nothing is ever wasted. We're so super efficient that if something within our reality is of no use anymore, then it is refused into some other form of matter that is meeting the unmet need of some other form of life. You don't have things lying around the house that aren't serving a purpose. They're either, distributed elsewhere to meet the unmet need of someone else elsewhere, or taken to a refuse centre to be refused. Now, our refuse centres obviously are extremely primitive, and some of you know I'm working on a blueprint for a new form of refuse centre that is capable of taking capsules that contain waste really deep towards the hottest parts of the core of the earth. And scientific discoveries very recently, even last year, are showing us that it's much, much hotter in the center of the earth than we realized. And my theory is, in fact I'm convinced of it, is that the plasma within the center of the earth is extraordinarily hot and capable of refusing, of disintegrating any form of matter, including nuclear waste, into its base elements, and where they can be refused into any other form of matter that is then birthed through the Earth's crust as usual. Now, once you have this scenario where our refuse centres have all got a big shaft going towards the centre of the earth, and we can refuse any form of matter and waste in an extremely efficient way, there's no reason to ever have any waste or anything lying around your house, or to hold on to something in the hope that you may use it again, once more in the next 5 years. And so, my passion really is the consolidation of fragmentation, of waste, of unutilized resources, expertise, skills of people that are not adequately meeting the unmet needs of some other form of life. It is the biggest waste that there is. People who are born, and in fact, they're part of nature, and so the fact that they were born is because the nature of their DNA means that they were born to meet the unmet needs of some other form of life just by following their own nature. This is the nature of every aspect of nature, that it only exists because there's an unmet need somewhere. This is how it all works. Everything is symbiotic. And so what I'm really seeking to do is to become so incredibly efficient as a species at producing and creating things to meet the unmet needs of other forms of life. And the moment that our capability and capacity to appreciate something that's been created vanishes, i.e. meaning that we create something and then we chuck it in a cupboard and never sees the light of day again. We have to be able to not recycle things as in, continuously and relentlessly reuse them and try and find out how to keep something relevant when in truth it wants to become obsolete. The moment that we get that feeling, we refuse it into something that is more useful. And we create from a clean slate, but it's imperative that this efficiency that we utilize things and refuse them is in place before we just go into a mass consumption mode. Because at the moment, human beings, it's a dirty word to consume, overconsumption. But in a scenario where where consumption is tempered by refusion, you have a state of abundance, and all of the consumption that we want, all the things that we want to consume, are in truth coming from the unseen surplus that's sitting in people's cupboards, that's sitting in their garages, that's gathering dust. Think about how many. I always think of this one when I think about this issue, and that is people like me like to tinker. I like to tinker, on old motorbikes, on old mountain bikes. I love to rebuild, turn old PC parts and components. I like to put them in new, refresh them and rejuvenate them and keep them relevant. And so I love tinkering with things, and so I need tools to do that. But some of the tools I hardly ever use. And I think to myself, I only hold on to them because one day I might need that thing in 2 or 3 years or so. Now think about how many people like me just love to tinker with things every now and then, and they need tools. It's such an immense waste. And so another project that I'm working on is a very simple project, and that is just the consolidation of tools. I've got another project that is the consolidation of spare parts and components for computers. It's a PC building company called Scion. No surprises there. And it's just a storehouse of people's components that they're not using, and they're being used to build new machines and PCs, and then everyone shares a percentage of the proceeds of that sale. We call it a share of spoils. And there are so many ways we can become more efficient with what we utilize and consume, and it's all about appreciation. How much capability and capacity do I have to appreciate this tool now? Where is the need that's not being met now because someone cannot access this tool? And so how can we create a way to provide someone who needs this tool with access to it when they need it? And it's through, I call it, because this is the aspect of nature that it truly is a paradox, and that is that it's continually fragmenting. It's, a cell is always splitting into another cell and another cell and another cell, and they're fractals of its former self, just continually splitting and fragmenting. But what happens is when those cells bump into each other again, they form a membrane around the outside, and so nature's always consolidating that fragmentation. And we're seeing it big time in technology right now with blockchain, where we're just distributing authority left, right, and center, but the fragmentation is so huge that the technology we now need to consolidate it and imbue trust into those consolidated aspects. And this is why banks evolved in this way. But the fragmentation of all of the unutilized resources all over the planet, we have to be able to consolidate it, and anything that is surplus, we have to refuse it so that the planet's not being depleted. We have to take everything that's not in use, send it back down into the center of the earth to be refused, so that we're actually not depleting the earth. But man, we have to get so much more clever about how we do this. And there are, in fact, the project where for refusing matter back into its immutable foundation components, its foundation atoms. There are materials that we can produce now that we can use to make capsules that will last long enough within the plasma, within the earth. They'll resist the heat for long enough to go deep enough to refuse the matter that's actually contained in the pod. So when you send the pod down, it gets refused, as well as the refuse inside it all gets refused. But the pod is strong enough and resilient enough to go really deep within the earth. We have these things. We are advanced enough to do these things. And this is the thing that does my head in more than anything, is the only reason we're not doing them is because they're not financially viable. They're not commercially viable, and this just drives me nuts. We use the way that the economy works as an excuse to not solve much deeper and more significant issues that are preventing us from thriving. We have the capability and the capacity to solve these problems now, but unless they're commercially viable, then we don't pursue them. And I'm of the other, my perspective is that the purpose of money is to dissolve these barriers. And so, applying these principles, my sole focus is to dissolve all of the obstacles and barriers standing in the way of developing and implementing wealth generating systems, processes, machines that through their nature are generating wealth, meaning a surplus of what's put in. And that's the only way that I'm going to be able to access a surplus of what I need in order to dissolve, to throw money at obstacles such as the ones I've been speaking about, without having to worry about whether it's commercially viable or not. I mean, it's just, wealth is our really, it's our inherent nature is wealth. All forms of life are wealth generators, in that they're capable of producing and radiating more energy than what they're taking in. And all progress is coming from an unseen surplus. Nothing sacrifices itself. Your energy comes from the food you put in your body, being refused into some other molecule that your body needs. And in an absence of the food, then the surplus the progress that it needs to make is coming from is the fat stored on your body. So we just are not efficient enough as a species to live in a state of wealth. Because of the wastage, that we've taken things from the earth that are currently not meeting the unmet needs of some other form of life. We need to refuse them and replenish the earth. And B, we've created a state of false scarcity. The nature of the economy, the way that it is now, is it's topsy-turvy, and it's so fragmented. We need a system and a mechanism to relentlessly and perpetually consolidate all of that fragmentation. And in truth, it's the consolidation of that fragmentation that makes the assets it's containing capable of generating wealth, because they can then meet the unmet needs of people whose needs are currently not being met. So to come full circle, I've kind of lured you into talking about all the stuff through using DNA. But ultimately, immutability is about understanding that when we refuse a form of matter into its base immutable components, that you see that, if I put, let's say, if we talk about this concept of a shaft going down to the center of the earth, into the hottest parts of the earth where the plasma is, if you talk about a pod containing matter within it that you send down the shaft and gets refused, if I put a banana in that pod and send it down into the center of the earth, its immutable components that it becomes are identical to whether I put a car down there, or a brick, or nuclear waste. The aspects of its nature that are immutable are identical. Hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, all of the elements on the periodic table, all the elementary components of all forms of matter are identical and immutable. Hydrogen's always going to be hydrogen. Carbon's always going to be carbon. The only thing that makes something mutable is the realized potential of collaboration between hydrogen and oxygen and carbon. It's only when they collaborate that they can create some new form of life, that they can create something entirely new that becomes mutable. Collaboration is what makes it mutable and changeable. Your whole body is collaborating. The hydrogen is collaborating with the carbon and the oxygen and the nitrogen, and everything else is collaborating in order to become mutable. But their essence is that they are immutable. But they are immutable when they are alone. And this is the big cherry on top I want to leave for the end of this episode, is that the same goes for you. Alone, you're immutable. And if you're immutable, you're unchangeable. And if you're unchangeable, then you're stagnating. You're in a stagnant state. And if you're stagnating, then you're in the process of decaying back into the center of the earth. And sorry if that sounds harsh, but the only way you're ever going to be able to become something else, or to create something else, or to become changeable rather than immutable, is to collaborate. Who is it you want to become? What is the life that you want to create look like? Who's around you? What's the environment like? What are your interactions like? Who are you bonded to? And that will show you all the different ways that you need to consciously pursue collaboration in your life. You are immutable in that your DNA is what it is. Your base elements that make you up are what they are. But you, as an individual whose awareness is that of perceiving themselves to be one human being, a person, then you are alone. And if you are alone, you are unchangeable. You are immutable. You are your essential self. And so just like the hydrogen having to collaborate with the carbon and the oxygen to become something else that is mutable and changeable, so too do you, as your essential self, have to seek collaboration with other individuals, and together you can become something else, something new, a company, an organization. You can create things that you are incapable of producing on your own. You know, depending on the essential nature of the person you collaborate with. And I always say the accountant. You bond yourself to an accountant, then you bond yourself to a lawyer, then you bond yourself to a graphic designer, then you bond yourself to a strategist, then you bond yourself to a web developer, then you bond yourself to a computer programmer, then a project manager, then a general manager, and as the essential individuals continue to become bonded to each other, what you see is a unique form of DNA evolving. And if those bonded individuals become an organization or a company, meaning that they consolidate themselves like a membrane being wrapped around them, in the same way that a cell does it, then those bonds of those individual human beings with each other, with one another, it literally become the DNA of that organization. And if one of those bonds weakens and an individual leaves that organization, then the organization is forever changed. The DNA of that organization changes, the behavior of it changes. You see? You are no different to nature. You are nature itself. And as an aspect of nature that is aware of itself, you are an essential part of nature, meaning that you are a building block that through collaboration and through bonds with other human beings who are also essential components of nature, you have the potential to form the DNA of organizations that are much, much greater than you. And if you live your life trying to put yourself at the center of it all, trying to be the center of the universe rather than one of the building blocks within something much, much greater that you belong to, then you will be alone forever. And you will stagnate. And you'll just wait. You'll just wait for something to change. When in truth, your entire experience is trying to show you that you're choosing to stagnate. And the earth's getting ready to bring you back into its center, to be refused into some other form of matter. Okay. So, time to collaborate. So how can we? If anyone listening to this wants to collaborate, you got an idea, reach out to me, connect anytime. My email address is ddnzl@pm.me. My essence and my gifts is that I'm visionary. And so if you have something, if you have an idea, if you have gifts, skills, if you have an intense passion to do something, create something, change something, the best way to engage me is that I can help you to see the true potential of what you're talking about in practical terms, and I can help line you up with collaborators who will work with you to help you realize that vision. I'm not an operational person, so I won't actually do anything for you other than stand by your side and help you to keep taking steps forward towards everything that you need in order to realize that vision. That's my greatest joy. That's what I love doing. So feel free to reach out. And it doesn't matter what the project is, how technical it is, how seemingly small it may be. If you're drawn to connect, then just connect. Okay, so I'll leave it there. This has been the nature of DNA. Talk soon.